Hey, what's up everybody, Nexil here. Today we're playing Kingdom Hearts Union Cross and we're going to be talking about the new Supernova++ Melody of Memory Kairi that is dropping in about a month in Kingdom Hearts Union Cross. This medal is amazing and has the new ability to renova all of the blue supernovas regardless of if they're power, speed, magic, upright, or reverse. It is an amazing medal and it is definitely going to be used to push the higher tier of players into an even higher tier. But in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the medal, and then I'm going to give you all my thoughts and recommendations on this medal because it is a difficult medal to decide if you want to get it for a lot of different reasons. But with that being said, let's hop into the video with a quick reminder that Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory does drop November 13th. That is this Friday, and we will be doing a live stream, but unfortunately, because there's a lot of Kingdom Hearts music in there, you likely have to catch the stream live. Otherwise, you won't be able to view it later because they have really been cracking down on the music ban hammer. So I will give you a notice when I'll be live streaming, so hopefully I will see you all there. But with that being said, let's go ahead, hop into the Melody of Memory Kairi medal, starting off with how to obtain this medal. So this is the notice attached to Supernova++ Melody of Memory Kairi, and then you will receive a Supernova++ Melody of Memory Kairi medal and 100 trait medals by owning any 4 of these medals. Now I went ahead and just made a little tiny graphic to kind of make it obvious which ones are eligible. So you can either get the stained glass that has Belle, the stained glass that has Snow White, the stained glass that has Cinderella, or the stained glass that has Aurora. All of these medals are dropping this month. I believe that the Cinderella and Snow White have already been released by the time of me recording this, and then the Belle and the Aurora will be dropping tomorrow, if not today, based on when I get this video out. Now, you have to have any combination of 4 of these medals. Now, what I mean by any combination, you can have 2 Cinderella and 2 Aurora, or you could have 1 of each, or you could have 2 Cinderella, 1 Belle, 1 Snow White, and that counts. It just has to be a total of 4 amongst the medals. So 4 of 1 is okay, or 1 of each is totally okay, as long as it's a sum total of 4. Now, how much is it going to cost in order to get the Kairi? This is where it becomes very questionable on whether or not you should get it. So, in order to get the stained glass medals, you're going to pull from a 10 pull mercy that is not falling price. So here's an example of the banners looking at the Snow White and the Cinderella one. It is 3,000 jewels per pull, and you're guaranteed 1 copy of these in 10 pulls. That means if you are really unlucky, you will have to do the full 10 pulls. That's 30,000 jewels per stained glass medal, per princess medal. And then if you have to do that 4 times in order to get the Melody of Memory Kairi, and you're super unlucky, you get none of them early, we're looking at most of 120,000 jewels. 120,000. That is an absolutely ridiculous amount of jewels in order to spend for essentially 1 medal. We will be doing analyses on the stained glass medals later, but all in all, they're nothing particularly impressive. They're nothing too particularly game breaking, with the exception of Aurora, who is going to be replacing Illustrated Riku, but we're going to talk about that in a later video. Point is, the Melody of Memory Kairi is an amazing medal, but in order to get to it, you have to have 4 copies of medals that are just okay. They're just all right. This is a little bit different than the Strelitzia. So remember that Strelitzia, you had to have 3 copies of any of the Supernova++ Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 medals from the JP Anniversary month. This is different than that because 1, you have to have 1 additional medal in order to get the Kairi, and 2, the medals that you had to get in order to get the Strelitzia were actually pretty good. They are some of the best medals in the entire game right now. The medals that you have to get in order to get the Melody of Memory Kairi are just okay. And they're not falling price. Like 120,000 jewels. Every time I say that number in my head, it's just like, is it really worth it? If it wasn't for all the bonus jewels, because remember, this month, we have bonus jewels going on if you buy giant amounts of jewels. So if we go to the notices, and if we look at the bonus jewels, because we have even more bonus jewels coming this month. So all the way down here to this autumn sale jewel box campaign. So pretty much if you buy higher tiers of boxes, the box C, box D, box E, you get additional jewels. But if it wasn't for these, if we could just go to the raw calculation of how much it would cost without all this bonus, 120,000 jewels is roughly about $800. $800. You could literally, without tax, you can get 2 PS5s with that amount of money. And that is insane. That is literally ridiculous. So $800 at best in order to get the Melody of Memory Kairi. If you don't have the jewels beforehand, this is a ridiculous amount to spend. Like, it's absolutely insane. I can't stress that enough. But let's go back to the eligibility in order to get the Melody of Memory Kairi. So what's the time frame on this medal, or what's the timeline for this medal? So first things first, the banners go away for all the stained glass medals on November 30th, and that is also when the campaign ends. So if we scroll down here, the campaign ends November 30th. That is when the stained glass medals go away. In terms of the rest of the timeline, the tally will be kept on December 1st. So if you have all of the stained glass medals, the big thing to note is that don't sell them, don't combine them before this day. You shouldn't be doing that anyways because they're all really high tier medals, so you shouldn't be combining original copies of them regardless. And then after they do the tally, for every 4 that you have, you're going to get 1 copy of the Melody of Memory Kairi on December 7th. So we're looking at about a month until anyone is going to see a copy of this Kairi medal. Now let's go ahead and hop into the Kairi medal details. So this is Supernova Plus Melody of Memories Kairi. She is going to be a tier 10 upright speed, just like a lot of us thought she would be, because the tier 8 Kairi was power, and then the tier 9 was magic, and now the tier 10 is speed. Kairi has a strength of 47,148, which is actually, I believe, one of the highest base strengths in the game, if not the highest base strength in the entire game. But it's effectively not as good as it sounds because she has a horrendous multiplier of 17.3. This is an awful multiplier, especially on a medal that is so expensive and should represent kind of a meta shift for us. So 17.3 is really weak, and that pretty much kicks Kairi out of being a core damage medal, a medal that you rely on to crank out a serious amount of damage. That honor still goes to things like Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi, Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Riku. So because the Kairi has such a weak multiplier, it's not really good for attacking. Now, this is also important to note because it changes what traits you aim for, because since we can't really use it as a damaging medal, we have to change the traits so that it's going to be better suited towards the medal. Looking at the rest of the medal, it has a gauge cost of 3, which is okay. It's pretty easy to get that. It's going to do 1 hit, and in terms of the special attack, it is going to hit all targets. For buffs and debuffs, it is going to be 1-turn buffs and debuffs. It's going to be self-buffing, and also gives full buffs and debuffs for upright power and upright magic. Gives you pretty much almost everything except for reverse, which is pretty bad because we're seeing a lot less reverse support in terms of medals coming out, in terms of effects that are out right now. So reverse medals are hard to come by, and there's not really a good selection of it. In terms of the buffs and debuffs, it will give all medals plus 13,000 strength for the turn. With extra attack, we are looking at plus 26,000 strength, and that is a huge amount of strength. This is actually the highest base strength increase we have seen from any medal. So the fact that it's attached to this Kairi that's super expensive, that's good. It's an extra plus 2,000 in comparison to something like Strelitzia. It's an extra 6,000 in comparison to something like Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, but again, huge paywall, $800, 120,000 jewels, yikes. At that point, again, you should be thinking maybe I should just wait until a cheaper medal comes out. Now, looking at the rest of the medal, it has a special attack bonus of 230%, which is tied with Strelitzia for the highest we have with a special attack, but its effect is irrelevant because we rely on the supernova attacks to give us like 320% or 330% when we're looking at Strelitzia. In terms of the effects of the special attack, it does gauge healing plus 3, but at the same time, the medal costs 3 gauges to activate. So you spend the 3 and then you just gain 3 back, and that's just, it's a net 0, which isn't really good. And you can put an SP reduction skill on this medal. So for example, if you put attack boost 13 max SP gauge 0, activating this medal is going to cost you 0 gauges, and then you restore 3 gauges, which is pretty good. But we are going to get back to that in just a little bit. It does count plus minus 0, which is okay. It's not really like a heal buffer because it doesn't restore count. And then it also ignores attribute, a trait that we normally see with raid medals or damaging medals. But again, going back to the idea, multiplier 17.3, definitely not a good multiplier by today's standards, and kind of kicks her out as a damaging medal. One big thing to note about this Kairi that people always have to think whenever they hear about any Kairi medal: it does not heal HP, and it does not cast Asuna. So this Melody of Memory Kairi is not really a heal buffer. Heal buffers are ones that restore HP, restore a decent amount of gauges, cast Asuna. They have a lot of setup pieces. This Melody of Memory Kairi has some setup pieces, but it doesn't do it very well. So I would not classify this Kairi as a heal buffer based on her special attack. Looking at the Supernova attack, it hits all targets. In terms of buffs and debuffs, it gives them for 3 turns, which is pretty good. And we've actually seen this before with Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Xion. Now, this is generally good for Gauntlet quests, where you might want to reserve your Supernova attacks in something like a high score challenge with the 3 gold trichlomas. You can just knock one out using just one supernova, the Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory Kairi, and then you could save the rest of the supernovas for the other 2 gold trichlomas. So it's pretty good for things like that, where you want to be careful about where you activate your supernovas. And it's also good for PvP, because remember, in PvP we generally use about 3 Keyblades per week. Having this activate on the first Keyblade will give all the base strength increase, all the buffs and debuffs for the full 3 Keyblades in PvP. So it's a pretty unique supernova effect to have. Now, in terms of the buffs and debuffs, it is self-buffing, and similarly to the special attack, it covers for also power and magic. Once again, we are not covered for reverse, so not reverse friendly with either the special attack or the supernova attack. In terms of the base strength increase, it gives all metals plus 10,000 strength. And I didn't say this with the special attack, but this is all metals. It doesn't matter if the metals afterwards are power, speed, magic, upright, or reverse. The Melody of Memory Kairi is going to buff all of them with plus 26,000 with the special attack after you have extra attack, and then plus 10,000 with the supernova attack. So plus 36,000 to all metals that come after it. And that's really good. Now, one thing to note about the Supernova base strength increase, it's good, but we've seen better. Because remember, a lot of the newer medals have strength increase plus 12,000. However, it's kind of evened out by the fact that the special attack gives plus 1,000 more than Strelitzia, and plus 3,000 more than most of the regular medals that we've seen nowadays. So the math all evens out, and to make Kairi a little bit better than the average medal. Now, in terms of, again, going back to that 3-turn effect, it works well with that because every single turn for those 3 turns is going to have that base strength increase of plus 10,000. And over 3 turns, that's pretty good. Again, it's useful in things like PvP. Looking at the rest of the buffs for the Supernova attack, it gives special attack bonus plus 320%, which is odd. I found this very strange because remember that for the Strelitzia medal, it had a special attack bonus with the Supernova attack of plus 330%, 10% more than what our standard is. Now with this new Kairi that's coming out, we took a step back, and it's actually now 320%. Now I know it's only 10%, but that 10% is more damage. And when it comes to how new metals are coming out, what we're focusing on, it looks like they're just making metals stronger and stronger. So that 10% can make a difference when it comes to dealing billions amounts of damage all at once. Now, looking at the effects of the Supernova attack, here is the big one. This is the one that makes this Kairi desirable and pretty much why a lot of people want it. It renews all supernovas. All of the blue supernovas can be renewed with this medal, and that's absolutely crazy. It doesn't matter if you are using this in a power setup, because then it'll just renew all the blue supernovas that are from those power metals. It'll do the same thing with speed, or the same thing with reverse, or upright, or magic. It doesn't matter which keyblade that you put this Kairi on, because as long as you have blue supernovas in the setup, this Kairi is gonna renew them, and that's absolutely crazy. Let's say you have a keyblade like the bad guy breaker, where maybe you have a reverse metal, and then maybe you have a speed metal here, and then maybe you have a magic metal here. Doesn't matter. As long as they're blue supernovas, Melody of Memory Kairi is going to renew all of them. And that's pretty versatile. That is really unique, because it means instead of having to have like one copy of the Renova Terra, one copy of the Renova Aqua, one copy of the Renova Ventus, you can just have one Melody of Memory Kairi and use her in every single setup in order to get that Supernova Renew. And remember that Supernova Renew is pretty much the standard for being able to do a lot of damage. And the magic number is about 2 to 3 Supernova Renews per Keyblade. So to renew Renova all of them is really good regardless of attribute. The way that this metal is worded, and let's actually go into the game text, because this is important. This is really important to pay attention to. So if we go to the game text, the way it is worded is very important, because it just says metals Supernova Renew, and that makes this effect almost bulletproof. It makes it future proof. It's almost foolproof, because as long as metals are the attacking unit in the game, which will never change unless they do some huge game shift, this effect is going to be relevant, because it just says metals. It doesn't say like something specific. It's so vague, it's so general, and the way it's worded is future proof. There's no, they have to literally get rid of blue supernovas in order for this to not be relevant anymore. And I don't see that happening anytime from now until the game closes. They have to do some huge meta shift in order to make this text not good. So remember, like I said earlier, Supernova Renew is easily the best way to pass harder content, and it can give you strength values that are normally impossible to reach. So let me make sure I touched upon that, because this is the huge part about this metal. And I guess I just want to say this is an incredibly broken ability to have. It's absolutely insane to renew every single blue supernova. Now, one other thing to note about the Melody of Memory Kairi, let's go back here, is that it triggers before slot 6. Now, this is good because it'll generally renova almost any metal, with the trade-off that, remember the order of activation. If there are 2 metals that trigger before slot 6, the one that activates first is the one that's earlier on in the Keyblade. So for example, if you have Dissidia Leon in the 6th slot, and then you have Melody of Memory Kairi in the 2nd slot, the Melody of Memory Kairi Supernova effect is going to activate before the Leon, and then you don't get those extra Leon procs. So just keep that in mind, that triggering before slot 6 is important, because you have to take into account all the metals that trigger before slot 6. So what are my thoughts and recommendations on this Kairi? First of all, one thing I want to just kind of call out, I don't know why they just didn't release all of the stained glass metals at the same time. There really is no reason they had to stagger them, unless it was something like production, translation, something like that. But there's really no reason that these metals all had to come out at different times. So I'm not really sure why they did that. But again, one of the big things about Melody of Memory Kairi, and I'm going to stress this until it's ingrained in your brain, this metal can cost you up to 120,000 jewels, which is roughly about $800 US. That is, again, 2 PlayStation 5s, and the console hasn't even been released yet. In order to cost this much, the metal has to be ridiculously broken, like just absolutely game shattering. Or, like the Strelitzia, it has to be to an extent considered free, as long as you pick up amazing metals along the way. Remember what I said earlier though, all the metals that you have to get in order to get this Melody of Memory Kairi, so let's pull those up again. All of these, nothing special about them. Nothing's crazy about them. Again, the best one of these is going to be Aurora, because she has the mastery on the special attack, which again does about, I forgot what the actual calculations were, but it's more damage. I think it's like times 4 more damage, something like that. I forgot the math, to be honest with you, but only the Aurora is really going to be meta relevant. The rest of these are just okay. There's nothing crazy about them. There's nothing too particularly strong about them that makes me want to pull for them. But when we look at the Strelitzia, Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, one of the best medals in the game. Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi, an amazing medal that ignored attribute and does healing, amazing. The Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Axel, super good copy medal that's really tricky to use but had a lot of great effects. These medals here, their effects, their strength, things like that, I'm not too impressed. So the fact that we have to spend about 30,000 jewels for each one of these, if you're unlucky, and they're only just okay in comparison to what's out, that it makes that 120,000 jewels to get to the Melody of Memory Kairi seem even more ridiculous to spend. So that's my big spiel in comparing this to the Strelitzia. I saw the Strelitzia as more or less a free medal because you picked up amazing medals and it's like, oh, hey, look, here's a free Strelitzia. But for this, it's like you have to pull with the intent to get Melody of Memory Kairi unless you're super new and you really just need a bunch of medals to get you started through the game. Then you might want to pull regardless, but 120,000 jewels is not easy to get to if you have low amounts of jewels to begin with. So quite frankly, if you don't have a lot of jewels as of right now without having to spend a lot of money, I would probably just ditch any thoughts about getting this medal right now. Almost no medal in the entirety of this game is worth 120,000 jewels. I can't think of a single medal where it's just like, yeah, let me spend 800 bucks to get this medal. Like, nothing has been worth it that much. So remember that the greatest part about this medal is that it renovas all medals, and that wording is future-proof. Again, I am going to pull this up one more time just to make sure that you get the idea. But if we look at the medal description, medals supernova renew. Like, that's all of them. That is all of them, and that's absolutely broken. So again, the only way this is not going to work out is if they change the wording, or better medals in the future stop having blue supernovas, or they somehow magically restrict their supernovas from being supernova renewed. So this is like foolproof wording. They have to edit this text in order to make this not good anymore. Since the first time supernovas were introduced, they have only been getting better and better. So Supernova Renew, I said it in my top 10 video, gets better and better as supernova attacks get better and better, as they give more strength, as they do more damage, as they give you more buffs, as they do more healing. So as supernova attacks get better, Supernova Renew gets better, and that makes this Kairi even more desirable. The rest of the medal itself is cheeky, like the 3-turn supernova buff or ignoring the target's attributes, but everything except the Renova itself has flaws. So let's go ahead, pull up the Melody of Memory Kairi again. So the buffing and debuffing does not cover reverse. That means you have to have another medal entirely in order to get that reverse buff and that reverse debuff. The gauge restoration on this medal is nice, but when it costs 3 gauges to activate the medal, you're restoring a net of 0 gauges, and that's not good. Ignoring the target's attribute is, again, it's nice, but that's typically something you want to see on a raid medal or a heavy damaging medal. We've seen this effect on Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, on Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Kairi, and those are beautiful damage medals. This one, with a multiplier of 17.3, even a base strength of 47,148, which is the highest in the game, doesn't compensate for that. It's still too weak. So that ignoring attribute thing, right out the window. I don't really like it for that reason. Now, one good thing about the Kairi medal is that the math works out beautifully for Melody of Memory Kairi. So this is the first graphic that I made, and then as I did the math, I was like, boy, these numbers are scaling really high. So this is just an example. Having one Melody of Memory Kairi is going to give you 276,000 strength when you use 5 Strelitzias. If you have 2 Kairis and 4 Strelitzias, it's 312,000. If you have 3 Kairis and 3 Strelitzias, it's 324,000. And I was like, all right, how far does this actually go? And how far does it go in comparison to the current supernovas that we have right now, supernova renews, that we have right now. So you can analyze this in your own time. but pretty much let's do some comparisons here. So the Melody of Memory Kairi and the Strelitzia combo, in order to get the highest amount of strength out of it, you have to have 3 Strelitzias, which is already hard for a lot of people because it doesn't exist anymore, and then 3 Melody of Memory Kairis, which is crazy because that's 120,000 joules per Kairi, 360,000 joules. Nuh-uh, nothing's worth that much. No amount of meta creep is worth that much in my opinion. So to get 3 Melody of Memory Kairis, yikes. In order to reach that maximum amount of strength, yikes. Now let's just compare this with the Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora. So Melody of Memory Kairi and Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora. The Strelitzia is kind of like an unfair example, mainly because Strelitzia's Supernova attack and her special attack each give plus 12,000 on activation. Let's look at something a little more realistic, something that most people have. Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora, which gives plus 10,000 with the special attack and then plus 12,000 with the Supernova attack. So if we compare the number of Melody of Memory Kairis we need in order to get the highest amount of base strength, it's still 3. It's still 3. So that means you have to spend 360,000 joules to make the most out of this Melody of Memory Kairi. And what that means is you're going to end up with 12 copies of medals that aren't amazing. No one needs 4 Auroras. No one needs 12 Auroras. I could see someone needing 4 Auroras for like really heavy power damage output, but 12 Auroras? Even 4 Auroras and some hodgepodge mix of 8 of the other 3, not very good. Like, that is a lot of joules to spend. So, not really a fan of the cost. Not really. I love the math. The math is amazing. But the cost associated with getting the best amount of math is absolutely absurd. So this is the math again. Take another quick look at it. The top 2 sections are going to be Melody of Memory Kairi, whereas the bottom 2 sections are going to be the single attribute Renova. So for example, if we had Aqua, the Renova Aqua paired with the Strelitzia, or if we had the Renova Ventus paired with the Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora. So take a look at this. Pause the video if you need to. Check out the math. But key points, you need 3 Melody of Memory Kairis in order to make the best of it. And even just 1 Melody of Memory Kairi is actually going to be better than the Renovas, than the regular Renovas that we have right now. It takes about 2 of the current Renovas, the single attribute Renovas, to reach the same amount of strength as 1 Melody of Memory Kairi. So just keep that in mind, that the math works out a lot in Kairi's favor. Now, let's talk about skills, because usually one of the best things that people ask, or one of the most frequent things that people ask whenever a new medal comes out, is what skill is good for the medal? And truthfully, in my opinion, the only good skill, there's literally only one skill that's good for this medal, is going to be Defense Boost Max. Now, why do I think that? Let's go ahead, let's eliminate the other skills in order. So Second Chance, people love heal buffers. Is this really a heal buffer? Not really. But let's say someone wanted to put Second Chance on it. Second Chance is not good on this medal because it doesn't heal HP and it will restore 0 gauges if you have Second Chance on it, because you're going to spend 3, then you're going to gain 3, and there are no gauges gained for the rest of the turn. So the fact that it's not a heal buffer means that you're going to put Second Chance on something else that's a better heal buffer, on something that is going to give you gauges back or heal your HP. Because remember, a lot of medals are dependent on having the maximum amount of HP. So Second Chance is better reserved for that type of medal. Now, Attack Boost Max skills are not good because this medal's multiplier, 17.3, not good. Not a good multiplier, even with a good base strength, doesn't make it a good damaging medal, and therefore Attack Boost Max is not going to work as well. Gauge reduction skills are not good because all the recent gauge reduction skills are tied to an Attack Boost Max skill. But again, this medal is weak. So let's say you wanted to put Attack Boost 13 Max Gauge 0. Really, the most relevant thing about that is the fact that you put the Gauge 0 on there. When I think about skills that I want to use Attack Boost Max and Gauge Reduction on, it's going to be medals with high damage output that cost a high amount of gauges, or even just like a relatively lowish amount of gauges like 3. So for example, Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora costs 3 gauges to activate, does a huge amount of damage, does well with Attack Boost Max, does well with SP Gauge Reduction. So I'd rather save those SP Gauge Reduction skills because they're inherently attached to Attack Boost Max to medals that can utilize both the Attack Boost Max and the Gauge Reduction. Now, Lux Max, I can see some people wanting to put Lux Max on this mainly because it has that ignoring attribute. But again, low damage output. You much rather would want to put it on something that's going to have a higher damage output. And in general, for raids, you don't want to be casting your Renovas anyways, because they don't get the Lux plus boost that the special attacks would. So in general, you're not using Renovas for raids, and this is a low multiplier, meaning it's not doing a lot of damage. Even if it's ignoring attribute, that's just okay. There are better raid medals than Melody of Memory Kairi. So after doing all that, really, again, the only skill that I think is valid for this medal is going to be Defense Boost Max, especially since you're going to be using it in almost every single PvP match that's going to exist from now until they somehow update PvP in some sort of way. So Defense Boost Max is the best skill for this Melody of Memory Kairi, so that might deter some people right there. Now, in terms of the medal, we always want to talk about what are the best traits. And since this medal has a weak multiplier, going back to that statement I said earlier, we're going to get back to how the multiplier plays into the medal overall. Low multiplier, low damage output. Realistically, you don't want to be putting things like ground enemy defense -70, aerial enemy defense -70, strength plus 1500. You're really going to want to put on this medal, in my opinion, for the long run, because this is a really long run medal. It is almost future proof the way it's worded. You are going to want to put something like extra attack 50%, and then a bunch of resist skills. Poison resist 80%, paralysis resist 80%. Hopefully on the pet trait, you're going to roll something like poison resist 100%, and then the rest of your traits are going to be paralysis resist 20%. So that is the best trait output in my personal opinion, and it's nice that they give you 100 traits, because you cannot pay for the resist traits. You have to roll into them. So 100 traits, hopefully that's enough for your copy to get a full decked out resist trait loadout. So that is the best set of traits in my opinion. Again, this medal lacks the capacity of a heal buffer, and like we said earlier, it doesn't heal HP, which is vital for certain medals to work, and it doesn't cast Asuna. So if you are paralyzed, which is happening a lot with a lot of the high tier enemies, or if you're poisoned and then you get to this medal, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to remove it. So that poison is still going to kill you unless you have like a poison resist or a different medal that casts Asuna, like Illustrated Kingdom Hearts 3 Xion. Or that paralysis is going to stall your setups. Status ailments are very, very relevant at high tiers of content, because they can literally shut down your entire setup. This is very relevant when we talk about enemies like Gula in the Keyblade War, who does paralyze you in the middle of your own setup. So that Asuna can be very, very useful. One other con about this Melody of Memory Kairi is that it occupies a damage slot that can easily be filled with something else. So since this medal has such a versatile Renova, you're going to likely bring it with you to all missions. This means that you have to put this Melody of Memory Kairi on Keyblade slots that won't give you a bonus. So for example, if we go to my game and we take a look at my Fenrir, so this is just a Fenrir setup that I have right now. Let's say this is going to take the place of our Melody of Memory Kairi. We're going to put it, for example, early on in the Keyblade, because it's going to have a low multiplier anyways. And then when we look at it, it gets no bonus from the Keyblade slot. It is not getting that 7.82. It is not getting that 8.62. So it's effectively like a useless medal that you're only using for the Renova ability. But for some people, it might just be better to have two Renovas, simply because you're going to be outputting more damage on average. Because remember that Renova, it's only going to work more or less for one turn. So you might want to have two Renovas as opposed to just one Renova. I know I said the math works out better for Melody of Memory Kairi, but in terms of a long run game, you might really just want to have two separate Renovas, so that way you can activate multiple Renovas across different turns, as opposed to Melody of Memory Kairi, we're going to shove all the damage into one big turn. And not just that, going back to the original point, Melody of Memory Kairi is pretty much going to be doing no damage. So if we put the Kairi on that slot, it's going to be doing 1 damage on high tiers of enemies. As opposed to having something like, for example, if we had this Riku and it was perfectly traded, this would be doing damage on this slot likely up until a certain point, because enemies do have higher defense the higher the level. But pretty much if you put the Melody of Memory Kairi on that slot, you have to accept the fact that there's going to be no damage coming out of that slot. Now, one big take-home point that I want everyone to know about this medal, it's not extremely better than just having each of the individual Renovas. So again, we talked about the math. And again, the math for this Kairi works out beautifully, works out amazingly in Kairi's favor. But like I said earlier, sometimes you want to have just those 2 Renovas, just so you can activate them on different turns. So it's not incredibly amazing over those because of that reason. Remember that most people are going to only get 1 copy of this Melody of Memory Kairi. So all these theoretical numbers of having like 2 Kairis or 3 Kairis, it's just not feasible for a lot of people. It's just not. So for some people, it's better to just have those 2 Renova medals that are of that particular attribute, the 2 Terras, the 2 Aquas, the 2 Ventuses, because 1, those medals are going to clock out actual damage on the slot, and 2, because it was easier to get them. Honestly, that's one of the big things, is that it was much easier to get each of the individual Renovas as opposed to Melody of Memory Kairi. So let me go ahead. I actually pulled out the math, because when we compare the last time that the Terra, Ventus, Aqua, and even the Xian Renovas were available in banners, they were available as 5-pull Mercies in a falling price deal. So let's do some math. Again, this Kairi at most is going to cost you 120,000 jewels. Now, if we look at that previous banner for the Renovas, falling price and 5-pull Mercy, after doing all the math, you can get a single Renova, so let's just say Terra, for 11k. And let's say you wanted 1 of each, so 1 Terra, 1 Ventus, 1 Aqua, 1 Xian. That's going to cost you about 44,000 jewels. So 1 of each Renova versus 1 Kairi is about a third of the cost almost, which is crazy. All right, now let's just say you want to believe in the whole 2 is the magic number, which it generally is. Having 2 Aquas, 2 Ventuses, 2 Terras, 2 Xians is going to get you to the highest amount of strength that you can possibly get. Even if you pulled on all of those banners a full round, a full second time, that would only cost you about 81,600 jewels to have 2 copies of Terra, 2 copies of Ventus, 2 copies of Aqua, 2 copies of Xian, and then when that those banners came out, you also could get the TVA. So, and then 1 copy of TVA, 9 Renova medals for the cost of 81,600 jewels, as opposed to this Kairi, which at most is going to cost you 120,000 jewels. Now, keep in mind that when we compare those two, 9 Renovas versus 1 Super Renova, in those 9 Renovas, you still actually end up with 39,000 jewels even after pulling for all of them. And then remember that in those banners, you had a chance to get the other Renova, so it was a lot easier to get those Renovas early. So let's just say you pulled from the Terra banner and then you got a Ventus casually along the way. That's 11,000 jewels you don't need to spend. So it's a lot easier to get the regular single attribute Renovas. The Kairi is better mathematically and versatility-wise. It's a lot better. But the jewel cost, remember that jewels, no matter what metals come out, no matter what Keyblade setups come out, no matter what new anything comes out, the jewels that you have now are equally as valuable right now as they are in like a year from now, in 2 years from now. The jewels that I started at the beginning of the game with, if I had the same amount right now, they're still the same value pretty much. So jewels are always valuable. Metals tend to come here and there. This metal is going to last a long time because, again, the wording is future proof. It's like bulletproof as long as metals stay the attacking unit and supernovas are still a thing. And supernovas just keep getting better and better. So this metal, amazing. Future proof, long run, for sure. But the cost of it is crazy. The cost of it is crazy. If you have the jewels right now, it might be worth it for you to get this metal. But if you pull for this metal or do all the pulls to get this metal in the end and have nothing left, if they release something new, it's over. Like, you just don't have any jewels left. So the fact that it just costs so much is incredibly painful. And not only that, but comparing Melody of Memory Kairi to the other Renovas actually had just better multipliers. Remember that the Terra, the Ventus, the Aqua, each of those had about, at maximum, a times 20 multiplier, and then at minimum about an 18 multiplier, which is, at the minimum, even better than the Melody of Memory Kairi right now. I think the math works out where it's about tied when you multiply the base strength and the multipliers, but like, that's not saying a lot. Remember that this Kairi is not going to get the benefit of the multiplier from the Keyblade. So lots of things are working against this Kairi, with the one big thing being that Supernova Renew in Kairi's favor, and that's a huge big thing. But just remember that 120,000 jewels is just absolutely bonkers to spend. Now, let's get down to the who I think should pull statement. Really, anyone who's pulling for this, anyone who is pulling in order to get this medal, should wait till the very last day. There is literally no incentive to pull in order to get this medal early, because you can't get it early. It's still coming out December 7th for everyone, so you can't use it for the November Coliseum. You can't use it for any events happening in November at all. And again, the medals to get this Melody of Memory Kairi, let's go ahead and pull them up one more time just for a visual. All of these aren't so ridiculously great that you're going to need them earlier than the last day. The only exception to this, again, is going to be the Aurora, because people will likely be using that Aurora in order to get higher tiered on PvE Coliseum, or even the Bell in order to get higher tier PvE Coliseum. But again, that all can wait till the end of the month. Remember that this campaign expires November 30th. So you could just do all the pulls on the last day and then spend your entire day doing Coliseum, and then boom, that's it. So there's no real reason to pull earlier on any of the stained glass medals in hopes of getting this medal earlier, because it's not going to happen. Now, one thing that I want to touch upon, because a lot of people have asked about it, and I've said it in my Discord, the likelihood of you getting a stained glass medal early. There was a picture of someone in a Facebook group who got 3 of the Cinderella medals, or 3 of the Snow White medals, all in the same pull. Now, that is an absolutely ridiculous amount of luck. Like, I didn't even do the math for it, because it's probably like 1 in a million people is going to have that. So in order to get this Kairi, remember, you only have to have 4 copies of any of the eligible medals. If you get 2 in the same pull, that still counts as 2 towards the 4. If you get 4 all in the same pull, then you got your Melody of Memory Kairi for 3,000 jewels. But again, that's probably like 1 in a trillion at that point. So let me give you the math in order to tell you how much it's going to be. So for every single pull from the stained glass banner, so let's actually go ahead, head back to the game and pull up the banner itself, just so we can get a good visual on it. So what are your chances of getting any of these 2 medals, or even the Bell and the Aurora when they come out? What are your chances of getting them early? So every single pull, you have a 4.8% chance to get the medal early. That's 1 every 20 people on the first pull is going to get their copy early. All right, let's say you've done 5 pulls. What are your odds? So by the 5th pull, you have a 21.7% chance of having gotten that medal early. So 1 every 5 people at that point. Now let's just say you're getting close to the 10 and you're like, oh my gosh, this is pull number 9. Like, what are the odds I'll get it early? So by the 9th pull, you have a 36% chance of getting it early. 1 out of 3 people are going to have, or 2 out of 3 people are going to have to mercy the medal, which is absolutely bonkers. Meaning that likely than not, you're going to have to mercy all of the medals. Realistically, actually, now that I've thought about it for like a quick second, 1 of the 4 medals you're gonna get early. Roughly around the 5th to 6th pull, you're gonna get 1 of them early. That is just how the averages all work out. So really what you're spending is about, for most people, and again, I'm just kind of freeballing the math here, it's going to cost you about 111,000 jewels. At max, it's going to be 120,000, and then at minimum, if you've got literally god tier luck, it's going to cost you 3,000 jewels. But on average, we're looking at the regular person having to spend about 111,000 jewels, and that's still an absurd amount of jewels. So really, I don't think like anyone should feel like they have to be pulling for this medal. The Kairi medal is absolutely amazing. Again, looking at this math, bonkers. Just absolutely bonkers how you can reach like 324,000 total strength just by having this Kairi, as opposed to the single attribute Renovas, where for the same amount, you can get 267,000. That is like that is a crazy amount of difference. That's a 60,000 amount of difference almost. So that's a lot of extra strength. The Melody of Memory Kairi is going to help those higher tier characters, higher tier players, get even higher tier. It's going to separate the gap between whales and free-to-play even more than it already has. So this medal, if you're a high tier player, is probably going to do you a lot of favors. Having 3 copies of it is going to do you a lot of favors. And if you don't mind dropping the theoretical $2,400 to get this, by all means, maybe that's just your personal decision, and I'm not gonna tell you not to do that. But for the average Joe like me, for the average Joe who's just starting the game, don't shoot to get this medal. Don't waste real life money. Don't waste all your resources. Don't sell your PS5 pre-order in order to get this medal, because there's a lot of things that are flawed about it. Ultimately, if you get this medal, you're going to end up with a medal that is locked to Defense Boost Max or Lux++ if you want just an okay raid medal. It's going to barely be doing any damage because of the low multiplier and the fact that you're going to be throwing it on a bunch of Keyblade slots that will not give it a bonus. It's going to have its traits locked to heal buffer traits because, again, low damage output. You might as well put something useful like max gauges or resist traits on there. It's not a heal buffer, so don't expect any HP restoration. Barely expect any gauge restoration, and then don't expect Asuna from this medal. And it's going to cost you at most, again, 120,000 jewels. Like, whenever I think about that number, it's just like, you don't want this medal. You definitely don't want this medal. And ultimately, again, you'll end up with a medal that is upright. And that means any damage from it is going to be absorbed by something like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the enemies that absorb, like an upright defender. Or it will be reflected, which is even worse, by something like a Leviathan. So the fact that it's upright actually kind of hurts the medal because there are more mechanisms the game has developed in order to make upright be worse. They literally have reflection, absorption, and we see those enemies quite a bit nowadays. So there's a lot of cons to this Kairi medal, with the biggest pluses going to be the math and the Renova for all medals regardless of their attribute. So that is my full comprehensive analysis on Melody of Memory Kairi. Am I going to be going for it? Absolutely. Am I going for it for meta reasons? No. No, because remember, what is the principal rule on this channel? Every Kairi, every Aqua, we got to go for it. And it's moments like this where I have all those avatar boards saved that give me 5,000 jewels apiece, where I have those Riku and Moogle saved just in case of an emergency like this. This is an emergency, not for meta level reasons, but because it's a Kairi medal. If this was like a Sora medal, I'd probably be like, nah, nah, not today. Not for 120,000 jewels, Senna, nope. But it's a Kairi medal, and I have to live to the promise of myself where I want to get it because of fandom. I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan, not a Union Cross meta level player. If I was a meta level player, I'd be using all my gems and stuff like that. But we're not that kind of person. We are the kind of person that just likes to have fun. So we will be getting a copy of Melody of Memory Kairi. Look out for the live stream happening somewhere on the 30th where we do all of our polls in order to make sure that we have the Melody of Memory Kairi. But with that being said, that's all for this video. I know it was kind of long, so hopefully all the information was absorbable. Again, all the info is posted in my Discord as a Word document that you can read instead of having to watch this video. So if you want that Word document, head over to the Discord and just read it all there. But with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments below. Hop in the Discord if you want to hang out and just talk outside of these videos. But that's all for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, until next time, take it easy.